Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host as always, Marcus Sadu, and today we're chatting about jet lag and how to minimize it. And I say minimize it because it's impossible to completely eliminate jet lag, but there are absolutely better and worse ways to go about acclimatizing to a new time zone. Now, all of this stuff applies to our daily lives as well, whether you're hopping on a flight or not. So how? Enter a term called social jet lag. I've talked about this concept with sleep expert Greg Potter, and it's extremely common just due to the way that our society is set up. So most of us work Monday through Friday, so we go to bed and wake up roughly at the same time during the week. Then the weekend hits, and because we don't work Saturday or Sunday, we often go to bed later on Friday evening and then possibly even later on Saturday night as well. Then Sunday rolls around and we need to wake up for work on Monday, right? But the prior 2 nights we went to bed later, so it's tougher to fall asleep on Sunday evening at our regular time. We end up hitting the hay later as a result, but our alarm still goes off as usual on Monday morning. So this is social jet lag in a nutshell. A lot of us are actually dealing with a form of jet lag on a weekly basis due to the shifts in our lifestyles over the weekend. Now, there's obviously no plane involved. We're not flying to a different time zone. We're not technically changing time zones, but we are shifting our circadian rhythm around, which is just a fancy way of saying our internal body clock. So the most obvious advice is, hey, go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. It sounds awesome on paper. Unfortunately, it's just not really based in reality because we're social creatures, and when the weekend hits, we want to do shit. So I'm going to explain how to minimize jet lag when actually shifting time zones, so you're hopping on a flight. But these concepts are also going to apply to social jet lag situations where there's a change in sleep habits over the course of the week as well. And then I'm going to wrap up the episode with a bunch of quick fire take-home tips to get better sleep on a nightly basis. Now, if you take nothing else away from this episode, take this. The primary influencer of our body clock is light entering our eyes. Just like the primary influencer of body fat gain or loss is nutritional intake, the primary driver that tells your body whether to feel tired or wired is light exposure. We all have something in our brains called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN for short. The SCN is responsible for telling our bodies what time it is, and the primary way it does so is by monitoring our light environment. So you can go outside and daylight hits your eyes, and that light conveys information about what time of day it is to your SCN. It's super simple, super straightforward stuff. For example, you step outside at 9 a.m. on a bright sunny day, light hits your eyes and tells your SCN, hey, be up, be alert, it's daytime. And then on the contrary, you step outside at 9 p.m. at night and it's dark. A lot less light hits your eyes. Your SCN registers that information and tells your body, hey, it's nighttime, so we're getting ready to shut things down to head to sleep pretty soon. Start releasing melatonin. Melatonin is the darkness hormone that sort of gets the sleep process rolling. Now, the tricky thing here is that humans are smart, right? We found a way to create artificial light 24/7, electricity. Our lighting environment wasn't anything we had to worry about or even think about before the advent of the light bulb. But now we have all the electronic access we want. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. If we want light, we've got it. Being that light entering your eye is the most powerful signal to let your body know what time of day it is, when you have lights on in your home or you're watching TV, you're fooling around on your computer, checking out Instagram, these electronics are stimulating you via their content, but also they're emitting light into your eyes and telling you, hey, be up, be alert, it's daytime. Now, the intensity of light from these devices isn't as strong as actual daylight exposure via being outside, but it's still enough to stimulate your SCN and impact your body clock. A classic example of this is when you go camping and you don't have any cell service. The most light you're going to get is maybe via a few lamps and the campfire. That's probably it. Now, they've actually done studies, camping studies specifically like this, where they've looked at different chronotypes, which are the classic night owls and morning larks. So whether you like to go to bed later and wake up later, or you like to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. And what they found was that people that claimed that they were night owls actually weren't all that different from the morning larks when it came to bedtimes. Now, realistically, if it gets dark at say 9 p.m., what are you going to do until 1 or 2 in the morning without any access to electronics? The answer is sleep for a couple reasons. So one, you're going to feel a lot more tired because you won't have any artificial light stimulating your SCN or your body clock to stay up. And two, you're just going to be bored and be like, well, fuck, I'm tired. I might as well go to sleep. I'm not doing anything else. There's no Netflix to watch, etc. So now we know the most powerful way to influence your body clock is by far via light exposure. There are two other lesser ways, which are exercise and nutrition, but in my opinion, in a practical sense, these two are a lot tougher to modify on a travel day. So we're going to focus more so on light because, again, it's by far the most powerful input. Now, one thing to note is that it's easier to fly west and acclimatize than it is to fly east and acclimatize, meaning it's easier to push your body clock back than it is to push it forward. So if I'm flying from Vancouver to New York, which is 3 hours ahead, that's going to be tougher than flying from New York to Vancouver, which is 3 hours behind, because simplistically put, it's easier to stay up a little bit later than it is to go to bed earlier. Now, let's get into a real life example. I recently flew from Vancouver to the east coast of Mexico, which is 3 hours ahead of Van. So this is the tougher scenario to adapt to, but I want to let you know exactly what I do from when I wake up to when I go to bed so you guys can get a really good idea of how this actually looks in a real life situation. So my flight was at 9 a.m. Vancouver time, and it was a 5-hour direct shot to Cancun. So I landed at 5 p.m. Cancun time. So I woke up and had coffee right away, which is totally normal for me, but I wanted to be sure to have my coffee earlier rather than later because Cancun is 3 hours ahead. And so the earlier I can consume caffeine, the better, because if I have it too late, that's just going to make it more difficult to fall asleep earlier that night, being that Cancun is ahead time-wise. So when you're going to a time zone that's ahead of you, consume your coffee as early as possible. And if you tend to have an afternoon cup as well, skip it. Or if you feel like you absolutely need it, try and do a half cup or a quarter cup. Now, I skipped breakfast because I typically do, but if you're a breakfast eater, I'd recommend eating it sooner rather than later because similar to the caffeine situation, food gets your body clock going to a lesser degree than light exposure, but it does. So earlier the better with breakfast as well. Now, I didn't end up eating anything on the plane, mostly just because airplane food sucks, but I was also sure not to consume any more caffeine that day because, again, I want to go to bed earlier rather than later. I also didn't let myself doze off on the plane because if I napped, that would have just made it more difficult to fall asleep earlier that night, being that, again, Cancun is ahead. Now, when I landed at 5 p.m. Mexico time, I got outside right away because I want to expose my eyes to the light in my current time zone ASAP. This is a really important one. So I went outside to wait for the bus from Cancun to Playa del Carmen, where I was headed. It was an hour long. And again, I didn't let myself doze off at all on the bus either. And when I got to Playa, it was about 6:30 or 7 p.m. Mexico time because customs was a little backed up and there was some traffic. So it was basically dark out. Instead of taking a taxi to my apartment, I walked because I felt like I needed to move. I'd been sitting most of the day, but also I wanted to expose myself to the darker lighting environment because technically for me it was 4 p.m. Vancouver time, but again, it's 7 p.m. Mexico time. So it was about a 30 or 40 minute walk from the bus station to my apartment. Now, when I got to my apartment, I used minimal light. I didn't blast the lights because that would have stimulated my SCN more and pushed my rhythm back. Now I had a quick shower and then I went out for dinner because I was hungry. I hadn't eaten all day. I usually choose to fast on travel days just because I find the access to food at airports typically sucks. As I mentioned before, airplane food isn't the best, so I just use it as a little fasting day for myself personally. Feel free to eat. Most folks actually eat more on travel days just because they're bored, they're sitting at the gate waiting for their flight, there's nothing else to do, they're staring at all the yummy restaurants that are right in front of their faces. I get it. I'm a weirdo that fasts on travel days. Now I walked to dinner as well so I could get some more light exposure, and I picked a spot where I could sit on a patio outside instead of sitting inside the restaurant with super bright lights. I ate some tacos and then I walked home. And when I got back home, I was sure to keep the lights dim and I watched a show on my computer. I use a program on my computer called F.Lux. I highly recommend this program because it takes the blue light out of your screen at night, so it stimulates your SCN to a much lesser degree. Night shift mode is also available for your phone, which I'd highly recommend using as well. So I fell asleep that night and then I just woke up when my body wanted to the next day. So as you can see, I really focus on the light exposure aspect of all this stuff, and I try and mimic my new lighting environment that I'm traveling to as closely as possible, as fast as possible. Now, truth be told, it took me about 2 to 3 days to feel fully acclimatized to my new time zone, which makes sense because the general rule of thumb is an hour a day adjustment wise, and Mexico is 3 hours ahead of Van, so 3 days more or less is spot on. Now let's take a look at flying back. So it's essentially the exact opposite scenario. If my flight is at 9 a.m. Mexico time, which is 6 a.m. Vancouver time, I'm gonna wake up. I'm not in any rush to get coffee in me or food because I wanna push my rhythm back as opposed to pushing it forward, right? So I might choose to even have a second cup of coffee on the plane because I'm definitely not worried about staying up too late because I'm gonna land at 11 a.m. Vancouver time. My first meal will be lunch in the afternoon, and then I'd most likely have a little bit of a later dinner just due to the time change. Now, when I land in Vancouver, a friend or family member is gonna pick me up from the airport, and when I get home, I'm gonna get outside again ASAP for a walk because I wanna expose myself to my new lighting environment as quickly as possible. Now, I'm not gonna sweat keeping the lights super dim or anything like that as the sun starts to go down because I'm gonna be super tired as it is, being that it's 3 hours later for me at that point. I don't really force myself necessarily to stay up in situations like this because I understand that it's going to take me a day or two to adjust. It's easier flying back to Vancouver because, like I mentioned, flying west is easier than flying east, so I don't sweat that too much. So as you can see, there's more quote-unquote room for error when flying to a time zone that's behind you, but that's exactly how I go about my travel days and adjusting to a new time zone. Light exposure is the key. And obviously, if you're going to, say, Europe from Vancouver, the time change is a lot different. So you're going to do the same things. It's just going to take you longer to adjust. That's all. Having said that, all of these same concepts apply to a social jet lag situation. Of course, the more consistent you can keep your bedtime throughout the week, the better. But for example, on Sunday, after you've gone to bed later on Friday and Saturday, get outside as soon as possible for a walk Sunday morning. Expose yourself to that light. It'll let your body know what time of day it is. And then also get your coffee in you earlier rather than later. Skip that afternoon cup or go with a half cup or quarter cup if you feel like you absolutely need it. You can see that the social jet lag scenario is like flying to a time zone that's ahead of you because you need to wake up earlier on Monday morning than you did on Saturday or Sunday. It's essentially the same thing. Now, as the sun starts to go down on Sunday evening, start to dim those lights. Use F.Lux on your computer if you're going to use it. Same with your phone. Don't expose yourself to a super bright TV. Essentially make it as easy as possible to get tired earlier so it's easier to wake up on Monday morning. Also, you can eat dinner earlier on Sunday night as well. I find this for myself as well as a ton of my clients. Eating too close to bedtime reduces sleep quality, and that's the last thing we want on a Sunday night when you need to wake up for work Monday morning. So have your coffee as early as possible, eat dinner a little earlier, start to dim that lighting environment. So those are a few practical situations, and now I want to give you guys some more take-home tips to set yourself up for just better sleep in general on a nightly basis. So first one is dimmer switches. Such a worthwhile investment in my opinion, and this way you don't have to decide between like a shitload of light or no light at all, but you can start to dim your lighting environment as the sun goes down. That dim light is inherently relaxing and it's more circadian rhythm friendly. Candles are actually great in this situation like this too. Second one is F.Lux. So install F.Lux on any device you can. It's absolutely free. It automatically syncs up with your time zone and starts to filter the blue light out of your devices, and therefore it's circadian rhythm friendly as well. Number 3 is develop a bedtime routine. We're fully aware that children need a bedtime routine and they can't go from running around the living room straight to bed. It's a process, right? We're the same way. So reading is an awesome pre-bed routine. Personally, I do it every night because I get the head bobs after a page or two. So it legitimately takes like a year for me to read a book, but reading before bed really helps improve the quality of my sleep. You can also take a bath or a shower, which can increase sleep quality for a lot of folks just due to some temperature regulation stuff. Speaking of temperature regulation, number 4 is favor a cooler sleeping environment as opposed to a warmer one. So a slightly chillier room is more conducive to sleep than a hotter room. So use less bedding as opposed to more bedding, and that should improve your sleep too. Number 5 is make it as dark as possible. So personally, I use an eye mask and earplugs every single night. And the most common response I get to that is, how can you sleep with something on your face? And the truth is you just get used to it. The earplugs I find are more individual. Some folks like it really quiet. I'm one of those people. And then other folks seem to like some sort of white noise in the background. So this is more of a personal preference thing. Now, I've also noticed with earplugs that women specifically, in general, tend not to feel quite as safe because I find they want to be able to hear everything. So if you're one of those people, I guess earplugs just aren't for you, but yeah, just make do. You can also use blackout blinds. That solves the issue of not being able to sleep with something on your face, the eye mask route, for example. Number 6 is you can set a bedtime alarm. So when we have alarms to wake up, they're super effective, but we can also use alarms to our advantage when it comes to hitting the hay. So if you want to be in bed and asleep by, say, 10 p.m., set your alarm for 9:15, 9:30, something like that. Get your routine rolling, and that should set you up nicely. Number 7 is have a coffee cutoff. So the speed in which we clear caffeine from our systems is hugely varied between individuals. So the average half-life of caffeine is 8 hours, meaning if you have a cup of coffee with, say, 200 milligrams of caffeine, 8 hours later, you'll have 100 milligrams of caffeine floating around in your blood, and then 8 hours after that, you'll have 50 milligrams, and so on. Now, the average caffeine clearance time is about 6 to 8 hours, more or less, but some folks clear it as fast as 4 hours, and then other folks take up to 36 hours in some instances. So huge variation here, so just know thyself and how caffeine impacts you personally. I drink 2 cups of coffee just about every morning, and I typically finish them no later than 10 a.m. or so. If I feel like another cup in the afternoon, I just go for decaf. Otherwise, it'll push my bedtime back and then enter the snowball effect. So if you're in a similar situation, decaf is an awesome sub. Number 8, if possible, exercise earlier rather than later. So exercising later tends to push your body clock back just a tad. So if you can, try and exercise earlier in the day. So if you wrap up work at, say, 5, and then 5:30 or 6 is the only time you can get your workout in, it's all good. Work with what you've got, but if you can exercise at, say, 5:30 versus 7:30 p.m., for example, go with the earlier time slot. This is actually why I stopped playing men's league basketball, because games are at like 9 p.m., you wrap at 10 p.m., you're still fucking wired, and then by the time you get home, you shower up, you wind down, you're going to bed at like midnight. So it just wasn't worth it for me personally. So having said that, just do the best you can with your exercise timing given your specific lifestyle. Number 9 is eat dinner or your last meal earlier rather than later. So going to bed on a full stomach is highly interruptive to sleep. So I'd recommend eating at least 2 to 3 hours before bed. Also, if you're someone who experiences the night sweats, more times than not, this is a super easy fix via just moving your dinner forward. Because when we eat, our bodies start to heat up in order to break down our food. So eating too much too close to bed is one of the primary reasons why folks wake up with the night sweats. So easy fix there. Last but not least, booze. So this is probably hands down the biggest sleep hinderer, but it's also the least popular tip because we love our alcohol as a society. Now, the earlier you can drink and stop drinking, the better. So the further away you can keep booze from the time you go to bed, the less it's going to impact your sleep negatively. So just do the best you can here. Skip that nightcap, favor happy hour. Now, a general rule of thumb I like to implement when it comes to things like Netflix, etc., is if you won't wake up early to do it, don't stay up late to do it. Nobody is setting their alarm and waking up early to watch a couple episodes before work, but tons of folks are staying up late to do so. So I find this really, really helpful as far as putting just sort of an arbitrary rule in place for yourself in order to get better sleep. I hope this episode gave you a better understanding of your body clock and how you can work with it as opposed to against it to sleep better, manage your jet lag when you travel, and just being less tired on Mondays and Tuesdays when you're out and about and social on the weekends. So if you think that someone may find this episode useful, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it around. I want to get this info out to as many folks as possible, especially because sleep is just such an important factor when it comes to looking, feeling, and performing your best. If you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching and/or workout design, you can click the link in the show notes below or check out n1fitness.com/coaching. Also follow me up on the socials at n1fitness on Instagram and Marcus Sidhu on Facebook. Also be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this on, and I will catch you guys on the next episode. See ya!